Self-control. When we hear that term, we often picture, these incredibly focused people.
Successful entrepreneurs, elite athletes, maybe monks meditating for hours,
Mm.
people with immense willpower.
And the standard narrative tells us this quality, this self-control, is just fundamental for getting anywhere.
It's presented as the bedrock of achievement, of productivity. Even philosophers have held it up as a virtue.
The core idea seems to be if you can control yourself, well, you control your destiny.
But we're doing a deep dive today to maybe question that a bit.
Is self-control really just about saying no all the time? About pure denial?
Or could there be something else at play, maybe something involving affirmation?
That's what we want to unpack today. We're looking for a perhaps fuller understanding of self-control, what really makes it tick.
And a good starting point is that famous experiment, the Marshmallow Test. Its initial interpretation really shaped how we view this.
Ah, yes, the kids and the marshmallows. The story went that waiting for the second marshmallow predicted all sorts of future success.
It did. And that conclusion became incredibly popular. It fit neatly with this cultural idea of meritocracy.
The idea that pure willpower is what separates the successful from everyone else. It's a compelling story.
Very compelling. But the story, like many simple stories, got more complicated later on.
Subsequent research started to peel back layers, didn't it? Finding environmental factors that the first interpretations missed.
Profoundly so. Later studies showed that the child's background, their environment, had a huge impact on whether they took the marshmallow straight away or waited.
So it wasn't just about the child's inherent discipline.
Not solely, no. It turned out children from, let's say, less stable or less predictable backgrounds were much more likely to just eat the one marshmallow immediately.
And that wasn't necessarily a failure of self-control.
It seems it was more of a learned response. If your experience teaches you that promises of future rewards, well, often fall through.
Then taking the sure thing right now is actually the logical move.
It's a rational adaptation to an unreliable world, not really a weakness of character. It's about learned beliefs regarding the future.
That really shifts the perspective. Delayed gratification isn't purely an internal switch you flip.
It's deeply interwoven with external conditions, especially, it seems, with trust.
Trust. That feels like a key element that often gets overlooked in these discussions about willpower.
It does. A child's choice in that test reflects not just their capacity to wait, but also their fundamental belief about whether waiting is worth it, whether the promised future reward is actually likely to appear.
So we move from thinking about innate willpower to thinking about learned expectations. This challenges that old idea of willpower as just this finite resource.
The analogy of willpower being like a gas tank, something you use up throughout the day.
That model feels a bit incomplete if trust and environment are so important.
It might be. There's an alternative view gaining traction, thinking of self-control less as a resource and more like a feedback system.
A feedback system, how does that work?
Well, drawing on work by user researcher Riikka Ivaninen, the idea is that sometimes when we feel we fail at self-control, it isn't because our willpower tank is empty.
But because of something else.
Perhaps because the task itself isn't aligned with our genuine interests, or our need for autonomy, or maybe our deeper sense of purpose.
So the brain is holding back.
In a way, yes. It might be strategically conserving energy because the underlying why isn't strong enough. The motivation isn't truly there.
That turns the whole idea of failure on its head. A lack of self-control isn't necessarily a personal failing.
It could be a signal, an internal message telling you that something about the path you're on isn't quite right for you.
So instead of just trying to push harder, grit your teeth.
You might listen to that feeling. Treat it as feedback. Ask yourself, what is this lack of motivation trying to tell me about my goals or my current situation?
This suggests a different approach then, not just battling temptation constantly.
Moving away from glorifying constant resistance. Perhaps the most disciplined people aren't the ones with the most willpower.
But the ones who are smarter about setting things up.
Exactly that. They practice environmental design. They structure their surroundings so they don't have to rely on heroic acts of self-control all the time.
Can you give some examples of what that looks like?
Sure. Simple things, really. Stocking your kitchen primarily with healthy foods makes healthy eating the path of least resistance.
Or using apps to limit phone distractions, setting timers, maybe even turning the screen to grayscale.
That's another one. Or, for social situations, scripting out difficult conversations beforehand so you're prepared and less likely to react impulsively.
So this isn't about avoiding challenges, but about being intelligent in how we approach them. working with our nature.
Precisely. It's a practical way to align your environment with your intentions, acknowledging that we're all susceptible to temptation. It's about making the desired behavior easier.
It feels like there's even more depth here, though. Connecting to our biology, our nervous system.
There is. Neuroscience offers some fascinating insights here. There's a clear link between the state of our nervous system and our ability to exert self-control.
Meaning if we're stressed out, it's harder.
Considerably harder. When we're in a state of stress, fight or flight, our impulsivity tends to increase. Rational decision-making takes a back seat.
But when we feel safe.
When we feel safe, calm, connected, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, judgment, and impulse control, becomes more active, more dominant.
So cultivating a sense of inner safety could actually be a foundational practice for better self-control.
It seems plausible. It might be one of the most fundamental layers. Making sure our basic need for safety is met allows higher brain functions to operate optimally.
And what about traditional practices? Things like fasting or periods of silence. They often seem like exercises in pure denial.
They can look that way from the outside, but viewed through this lens, they might be something different.
More like training.
Perhaps training and delaying gratification for a more meaningful purpose. They aren't just about not doing something. They can be about rewiring the mind to prioritize long-term values over immediate impulses.
So self-control in that context becomes less about deprivation and more like a form of dedication.
A dedication to your future self, perhaps. A commitment to what you value most deeply.
This really paints a very different portrait of self-control, moving away from that image of constant struggle, of grit and force.
Towards something more like grace or inner coherence, a state where your actions align naturally with your values.
So self-control redefined as alignment.
Alignment between your internal compass, your values, your purpose, and your external actions.
And those moments of perceived failure where we don't exert the control we think we should.
We can see them differently, not as defeats, but as valuable signals. Maybe your environment isn't set up right, or your beliefs are getting in the way, or the goal itself isn't truly yours. They indicate misalignment.
Which reframes discipline, too. It's not punishment.
It becomes proactive design, designing your surroundings, your systems, even the stories you tell yourself to support who you want to be.
So ultimately, true self-control isn't about crushing all your desires.
Maybe it's more about cultivating the right desires, nurturing the impulses and goals that genuinely align with your core self and letting those guide your actions.
So to sum up this shift, we've moved from seeing self-control as this internal battle, this finite resource of willpower,
to a much broader view involving trust, environmental design, nervous system regulation, and fundamental alignment with your values and purpose.
and crucially, seeing those moments where control seems to lapse not as failures, but as potentially valuable information pointing towards necessary adjustments.
It really changes the whole dynamic,
Yeah.
which leads to a final thought for you, the listener, to consider.
How might your own approach to your goals, to challenges, change if you started thinking about self-control less as resistance?
And more as a state of alignment you can cultivate.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Deep Thoughts Podcast. I hope you found insights and inspiration to take with you on your journey of self-growth. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on new releases and exclusive content. See you next time, where we'll continue to help you grow and explore your full potential.